thank all of you for being here and joining us tonight. My name is John Osp, and I'm the gallery director for the RIT College of Art and Design, which includes RIT City Art Space, which is located in the historic Sibley building at Liberty Pole Plaza in downtown Rochester, New York. We're happy to be hosting an exhibition called Beyond Addiction, Reframing Recovery, which is a show that redefines addiction and recovery through photographs, stories, and shared experiences. This show is currently on view at City Art Space, and it'll be on view through February 21st of 2021. City Art Space is currently open to the public Thursday through Sunday, 1 to 5 p.m. Admission is always free, and so I hope you get a chance to visit the space and see this show in person. Tonight, we welcome the curators and some contributors of the exhibition for a discussion, which will be led by the exhibition curators, Susan Stellin and Graham Mackindo. Susan Stellin is a writer, researcher, and adjunct professor in the Journalism and Design Department at the New School in New York City, and Graham Mackindo is a photographer and part-time associate professor at Parsons. Together, they've collaborated on various projects, combining interviews and photography, exhibitions, talks, and a memoir documenting Graham's own addiction, incarceration, and recovery. Tonight, they'll be joined by photographers Joshua Meltzer, assistant professor in the photojournalism program and RIT's College of Art and Design, and Nina Berman, associate professor at Columbia University, along with her collaborator, Kimberly Stevens. And they'll all be discussing photography and storytelling around addiction and recovery. Before we get started, though, I just want to mention some thank yous, of course, to Susan Stellin, Graham Mackindo, and Joshua Meltzer for bringing this important show to RIT City Art Space, and also to Laura Shackelford, associate professor and director of RIT Center for Engaged Storycraft. We're happy to have you with us tonight. Thanks for joining us, and welcome to all of our special guests here this evening. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Susan Stellin, who will be guiding us through the discussion from here. Susan?
Thanks, John, and thanks to you, and again, Laurel Shackelford at the Center for Engaged Storycraft, who was instrumental in kind of bringing this exhibition and the workshop that Graham and I taught on storytelling about addiction and recovery to Rochester. And Josh and Nina and Kimberly for joining us tonight to talk about, the exhibition and kind of the work that you've been doing. So you've saved me from having to repeat the introductions. So I thought, we could just start. Graham and I not only collaborate, we're married. And so I'm going to turn it over to him to give some background just on the bringing the idea for the exhibition and kind of how it came about when it debuted in New York City, first in 2019.
Hi, thank you for everyone for joining this webinar. It's great to be talking about the exhibition that Susan and I have worked on with the help of John and Josh and Laura, which has been really great, and then Nina and Kimberly have both participated in the New York version and this one here. I'm going to screen share for a second, and hopefully everyone can see that. I just want to give a little bit of background about the exhibition. The exhibition sort of came around when I was teaching a documentary course at Parsons, where I'm teaching, and I'd previously worked on an exhibition in that space called States of Incarceration, and one of the people who worked on that had recommended me to the curators that give out that space at the New School and said, why don't you pitch something? And I thought about it long and hard, and they had seen some of the work that I'd done around addiction and recovery, and I'd had an exhibition at the Scottish National Portrait Gallery, so they were primarily interested in me exhibiting that work, and the dialogue around the work was primarily looking at addiction. And much as I kind of wanted to do that, Susan and I talked a lot and thought about how can we get away from that narrative a little bit instead of retreading that old ground of like addiction, that's the story that everybody seems to think they know, and then move beyond that and move into what does recovery look like? What is that? So that was the kind of starting point for it, and we kind of flew with it and immersed ourselves in this process of finding photographers, finding artists, finding people that were working on long-term projects that would be of interest to people. So that's Kimberly there on the left, actually. This is a photograph from the opening night from our New York exhibit. which some of the work is in the Rochester version of the show as well. And this is in the hallway there, and some of these were student works and some were from a guy who worked with a harm reduction coalition. So we took some of these ideas and have carried them on throughout the exhibition. And this is Nina's work there on the right, and then another guy on the left called John, who did a project with his family in Florida. And this is my friend Kim, who's looking at her picture, which is part of the project that Susan and I did about re-entry and recovery, primarily looking at people who'd been through the criminal justice system and what it was like being in recovery and re-entering after a period of time of incarceration, which was something that I'd gone through myself, and it resonated a lot with me. So that's that. And Josh was someone that we met through, someone had recommended Josh to me, and I reached out to him, and that's how we got Josh into the exhibition. And I think you wanted to go on into Josh's work here, Susan?
Yeah, well, first kind of just wanted to talk about then, you know, Josh's role and sort of, you know, bringing the exhibition to Rochester. You know, can you kind of talk about that process and sort of how that came about?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you know, our connection was really one of those sort of happenstance Facebook moments where one of my colleagues wrote my name in a comment under your plea to look for photographers working on these issues. And so we connected. And while I was at the show, we had just launched, the RIT had just started using the space at the bottom of the building that you saw behind John. And I just said to Graham and Susan, you know, we've got this great new space, which is right downtown. It would be perfect for this show. You know, let's keep in touch about it. And so that turned into the show, which is up now. But it also sort of, I was working with an English professor here who had launched a center called the Center for Engaged Storycraft, which is sort of a multidisciplinary group of people interested in storytelling. And there was some opportunities to launch these little 1-credit workshops for students on different topics, some of them around virtual reality, medical illustration, all kinds of different things. And it occurred to me that Graham and Susan might be able to offer a workshop around this issue of storytelling of recovery, really, and helping students break away from some of the stereotypes that they've been seeing and that they might want to be making, and think about how to sort of reframe the story. And that workshop was supposed to be in April over a long weekend, and then came COVID, and we were lucky enough to be able to reschedule it to the fall, and it just wrapped up just a couple weeks ago, which was really wonderful. So it sort of turned into bringing the gallery show here, but also this workshop. And the workshop was made up of half RIT students, mainly photojournalism students, and then half from the people from the community who had some kind of lived experience around addiction and recovery. And that was something that Graham and Susan, you know, thankfully really insisted on, that we couldn't have a workshop with a bunch of photojournalists talking about how we should redo these stories without the people who would be in these stories. And so I think that was one of the most powerful parts of the workshop, was the discussions that we had, the ability for students to ask questions, the ability for students to make connections in that community, and make work that's now in the exhibition as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, that was a really great teaching experience for us, and kind of, you know, also offered an opportunity. You know, we had this idea that we didn't want to just take, you know, a set of work that came from, you know, New York City largely, although there were a lot of contributions from people outside New York City, but, you know, wanted to do something that also incorporated contributions from the community and local artists, and kind of reflected what was going on in Rochester. So the workshop, you know, enabled us to do that. And as Josh said, really being able to have that mix of students and, you know, artists and people in the community in recovery and advocates, people working in harm reduction, really created a great exchange. People talk a lot about a community engagement, and I think that really kind of worked and gave people a space. You know, some of the things that came up was, you know, people expressing that they didn't really have a forum to talk about a topic that involves so much stigma, and that, this, particularly for younger students, who might still be kind of trying to work their way around, storytelling, and just how that overlaps with personal experience, and, creating a place where people felt comfortable. And surprisingly, even migrating to Zoom, I think, did allow for maybe a little more intimacy than we had expected, and also let us, have gaps between, doing reading and then meeting again a couple weeks later. So wanted to kind of start talking about some of the projects in the exhibition. And, as we've mentioned, Nina Berman and Kimberly Stevens collaborated on a book called An Autobiography of Miss Wish. And that basically tells the story kind of not only of their friendship, but Kimberly Stevens, who is a survivor of sex trafficking and addiction, and tells that story, not just in a collaborative way, but through, kind of photographs plus drawings, diary entries, documents, letters, and kind of other, what would you call it, kind of ephemera, sometimes Graham says that word, to sort of broaden out what, visual storytelling can kind of include. So Nina, if you want to start just talking about how you and Kim first met, and, then how that kind of evolved into photographing her.
Yeah, well, thanks for hosting us and for putting on the exhibition. We first met 30 years ago. You can believe it. So, yeah, we met in London, and I was there. I'd gone to London from New York, kind of searching for a story. I wasn't sure what. I had sort of vague notions of looking at the end of Maggie Thatcher's era, and there were a lot of street kids living in London at the time. And me and Kim met randomly, literally. One evening, she was banging on a door trying to get into a hostel, if I recall, and I took her picture, and she said, "Who are you, or where are you from?" And 30 years later, we're here. This is short and story, but yeah, so I guess, I was just kind of photographing at the time, just to see what her life was like on the street. And she was using a bit then, and I didn't really know what I was going to do with the pictures when I got home. I offered them to magazines, but no one was interested in them, and I, put them away and kind of forgot about them. But me and Kim corresponded for a while through letters and sometimes phone calls, and eventually she was able to escape the situation she was in, and now she's here.
So for you, Kim, obviously, Nina's been photographing you a lot, and, just curious what that's like for you to be photographed over a long period of time, and kind of has your feeling about having your picture taken changed over that time?
For me, when I first met Nina and she was taking pictures, I felt so important, and it made me feel good. Mm-hmm. And to get that much attention. And through the years, I've had some ups and downs with other photographers and stuff, as being a street kid in London. But Nina was different, and she was more caring, and I just felt comfortable around her. Mm-hmm. And I think there was one time that she stopped taking pictures of me. Mm-hmm. And she saw the trauma and the addiction and what it was doing to me. And I think she felt like she didn't want me to be a subject, mm-hmm. kind of thing anymore. It was deeper than that. Our friendship grew, and she stopped for a long time, and I was really disappointed because because I like the attention. No, and
there was that moment. I remember I started taking pictures of you again. You asked me, like, why'd you ever stop?
Yeah.
I don't know. It seemed irrelevant, actually, me taking pictures at that time.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so for you, Nina, I mean, how do you, obviously when you have a friendship, and you probably almost always have a camera with you, how do you decide sort of when to pull out your camera, or when is a moment that you want to document, or is it more deliberate in terms of, I think, let's do some photographs at a certain point?
Well, once we had decided to make a book, there were certain things that became very deliberate, and we had never operated like that before. So, there was this long period of time where I wasn't taking any pictures of Kim. I was just collecting things, collecting her drawings and communications, and I didn't feel a need to take any pictures. And then actually I thought at some point that she was going to die, and I said to myself, like, here I am, I've known this person for so many years, I'm so close to her, and I've got so few pictures of her now, I better get going, and make some photographic memories. But then when we started to make a book together, then we were plotting out pictures, and started to make a list of things that we wanted to photograph, and started to dream up some pictures together, which was really quite different than how we had ever operated. Like this picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that one.
Yeah. This picture, actually. Yeah, in Central Park. We were like, let's see what we can do in Central Park, and just started roaming around there. And this picture kind of, was created. Actually has a little bit of a morbid, like a beautiful kind of morbid subtext, but
Is that even a thing?
but yeah, that was exciting actually for me. It was very exciting as a photographer, because Kim is an artist herself, she's super creative, and so she contributed ideas, and that was really beautiful.
And the part when you went to England,
Right.
And I told her, we were on the phone, right? And I told her what street to go down, to take a picture of this, and it was great. I really liked that.
Yeah, we could make a shot list together, and then she would kind of direct me when I went back to England to photograph things, and it was nice. Actually, she was like a producer in a way, which was really, really nice, actually.
And for anyone in the audience, that's Kim's dog in the back, puppy.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
New addition named Corey. And so, kind of a question for both of you, collaborating on a book. Graham and I did a memoir together, so have some experience with, how do you kind of negotiate, what to include, what to leave out, what was that process like in terms of, which images and documents to use or create, kind of to tell this story?
Yeah, well, we had help, because it was a lot of material, that spanned decades. And Kim collected a lot of things and made a lot of things on her own. And so we had someone help us sort it through. Tom Vanderheiden, who's a book designer, and he met Kim a couple times, and we worked with him really over 2 years. So that was a big help. But we didn't really have like any fights, except for one picture I kind of liked, but it really spooked Kim.
Yeah.
Just like
Yes, it's just definitely not that one.
Yeah, not that one. So we didn't put it in, but
Yeah.
we were like, I have to have this picture. I mean,
No.
we don't really operate like that.
Yeah.
So yeah. But there were some scenes like from Rikers Island, that were really important in the storytelling. And so I could photograph the exterior of Rikers, but we thought that Kim should just draw her experience, and that became an important visual. So her drawings from that time.
I'm going to come back to that, kind of in talking about sort of different approaches to storytelling and particularly collaborations. But Graham, do you want to kind of talk about a few of the other, projects that we included, and kind of while you're pulling those up, I mean, basically, what was great about Kim and Nina's collaboration is, we chose things to try to show different aspects of this process. So, moving beyond addiction, there are projects about harm reduction, there are projects about treatment, there are projects that intersect with mental health challenges, and then just kind of the practical challenges of kind of getting back on your feet. So, have added a couple new things in Rochester, and, Graham has kind of selected a couple to talk about and show visuals of.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of really important for us to have this core body of work, which sort of defines what, the exhibition is about, but also to mix it up when we engaged with other people or found other people that were doing interesting or exciting work, So that's what we did. We added a few different bits. If you look on the left-hand side of this picture where the people are standing on the left, there's a whole wall there that's student work that we'll show later on, where we had people come along for the community and the students worked with them and interviewed them and photographed them. And that was particularly rewarding as well because of the engagement and the sort of, that feeling that people get of working together to say something. It's a real rewarding process. But this is one guy that we had met. His name is Michael Dillo, and he's from Florida. And he'd done a lot of work down there in Florida, and he's had a couple of exhibitions down there on just the landscape of recovery, the recovery communities there, the pop-up recovery places, the people that go to them and stuff like that. And I found that work was really intriguing and very different, and he's been doing this project off and on, a couple of different projects around that sort of theme for quite a while now. And it just added a different element from it. He's in recovery himself, and he'd been through a lot of different routes to get to where he is. So, adding people like him into the mix was nice. As I said, it brought a very different type of image making to the exhibition. Sorry, I'm jumping on a little bit. It brought that, so it's very Florida looking, and sort of these, some of these pictures say Fresh Life Recovery Center, and there's another one that says, I can't remember what it says in that billboard, that says looking for recovery or sobriety or something like that. So it's particularly interesting because there is a lot of recovery homes down there, and they'd mixed that up with portraits of people, and the guy on the right, because a lot of people in recovery have lost their licenses, their driving rights and stuff like that. These little Vespas are how people get around to meetings and how they get around because they can't drive. And
Graham, are you clicking through the slides? Because I don't know if we're all seeing what you're seeing.
You're not seeing these?
No.
Oh. I'm on screen share. Can you see it now?
There it just went to Neil Sneddon, but not Michael Dillo there.
Oh, you didn't have these ones?
No.
No.
So
all right.
just to kind of give a visual.
All right. I don't know what that was. I put them on screen, full screen share. Maybe it's not working with that. Anyway, these are Michael Dillo's. These are the ones I was talking about, who's done this stuff on the, the landscape of recovery in Florida and the people who frequent it. And the one I was talking about recently was these little Vespas, because people lose their driving licenses and they can't get around so much. So they have these little things, and you can always tell where the recovery house is because these little Vespas sitting outside. And this is one of his. So as I said, this brought a different sort of feel to the pictures and to the exhibition. So it was a useful one to throw in there. And this is an install shot, and on the left is a guy called Neil Sneddon, and he was in the original show, and he's actually a social worker in Scotland, and he works with people in recovery. And he did this exhibition, this series of work, where called what's it called? Developing
Recovery.
Developing Recovery, yeah. And what he did was his clients is he got them all to take a camera and a little point and shoot black and white thing, and to record things around their life that were important to them now. And they all came back with different pictures, and he went through them with them, and they selected one image, and then they decided to, emphasize one image that meant something. And the people wrote about why this dog was important, or why shopping was important, or why that toast and cup of tea was important. And this guy wrote this very pertinent thing here about keys. And he wrote that, to some looking at these are just a normal set of keys, but to me, these insignificant lumps of metal signify hope, recovery, and most importantly, trust. And he goes on to talk about when he was in his addiction, no one would ever have trusted him with keys. And now he has keys to his place, keys to the meeting place, and keys to his sister's house. And that recovery has given him trust back. So that's another body of work that we've kept in the show. Because it's really powerful, and it really resonates with everyone who looks at it, because, you know, the words that people say about the picture and why it means so much to them. And the pictures are not great photographs per se, but the image and the text are really, really powerful. This is a guy called Tony Fuse. He's been in both shows, and he photographed this young woman called Stephanie that he met in the streets of Toronto, and he actually took her into his house and helped her get into a detox and then a rehab, and then got her clean, reconnected her with her family, and she now lives back in Nova Scotia with her family and has been better ever since then. So, you know, I mean, again, it's these bodies of work where people have been engaged with people. It's not just parachuting in and parachuting out. There's a sort of depth to the work. Do you want to talk about this one, Susan? Because you know a little more than this than me.
Well, I was going to move on to, we can kind of come back. I was going to talk about the portraits for Dope Sick.
Okay.
Dash, you know, just to kind of introduce those.
All right.
And then we can come talk about Cheyenne's work there too. But Josh, you know, one of the things, just to give some background on this, the portraits that we included in both exhibitions were from Beth Macy's book, Dope Sick. So, you know, what was great about being able to show, you know, some of these people is that we often don't really see or hear the stories of the people who are kind of working in the treatment field, you know, working to kind of help people get better in various realms, whether it's kind of EMT technicians, nurses, faith leaders sometimes. So Josh, you know, just wondered if you kind of want to give an overview of, you know, what that process was like and the people you photographed in Virginia.
Yeah, so Beth Macy is a writer who I was on staff with at a regional newspaper in Roanoke for about a dozen years or so. And I think I did every long-term project with her that I did in those years. And so both of us left the newspaper, and she reached out to me to think about collaborating on this book. And this is the copy of the book here, Dope Sick. And you know, I don't consider myself really a portrait photographer. I'm a documentary photographer, and so it's something that I do sometimes. But I had this equipment. This is one of the cameras that I used here. These are 4x5 large format old American, you know, press cameras from the 50s, and I had them lying around, and I really hadn't found a project that seemed right for them. And this one just seemed right. I don't know. It sort of slowed me down. I didn't have a lot of experience with them. So it was, aesthetically, it was enjoyable for me to work with the gear. It challenged me a lot. It slowed things down, you know, where I only made maybe 20 pictures of each person or 25 pictures of each person. I ruined a lot of film by making stupid mistakes. And that was something that, you know, the people I photographed and I could laugh over. But it was always, an interesting piece of equipment to pull out of a trunk and set up. And it generated a lot of, you know, conversation. It filled some of the time as I was getting to know some of the people. This is Giles Sartan on the left. He's a young EMT who sort of committed himself to becoming an emergency medical technician after witnessing two of his high school classmates overdose in class one day and you know, go unconscious. And then Dr. Art Van Zee is on the right, and he is in, most of these pictures were made in the far western tip of Virginia. He works out of a small town called St. Charles, Virginia, which is right in the heart of the coal mining country. And he's really important because in the late 90s, he was one of the first doctors that recognized that a lot of his patients that he was seeing were becoming addicted to prescription medicine. And he and some others in this very tiny community pushed back really hard against the pharmaceutical industry very, very early. Think about the late 90s, we're talking about more than 20 years ago. And had evidence of this high rates of addiction, and he still stays in that community, and he has a clinic. He works over 14-hour days still. He's in his early 70s, very, down to earth person. And it was just, kind of a wonderful experience to meet all of these people that Beth had spent much, much more time than I had interviewing them. She'd spent a lot of time out in the community I had already left the state and lived in New York, so I spent several weeks of one summer sort of crisscrossing across Western Virginia with the gear, and I had a list of names, and I was setting up times and meeting times with people. So, the pictures are very simple and straightforward. I felt like, sort of in a sort of nice way that the old-fashioned kind of slow gear sort of was a way of showing my respect for them in sort of a sort of a shallow way, but it was important to me. Like, and I think it was interesting for them to be photographed with that kind of gear. I mean, Kimberly was talking about, kind of being the subject and feeling that excitement of having the attention, and this kind of camera does that even more so because it's so slow and that kind of thing. So these are a couple of the people that are featured in the book. And what's interesting is that the images for the photographers that are listening, were made on a 4x5-inch film. And this is how they printed in the book, which is actually smaller than, so they actually had to get reduced from the original size. So I've been able to I had an exhibit in Virginia where we made, 3 and 4 foot prints from these, but these in the book are really tiny. They're actually smaller than the originals, which is kind of interesting. But it was a great process. And Beth is working on another book now, which will be about sort of the fight over money, legal money that's being settled over some of these big cases, and where this money is going to go and which communities are going to maybe be able to benefit. And I'll probably do some of the same things with some of the same equipment. So this is Teresa Tyson, and she's a nurse practitioner who runs a mobile health center out of like a mobile unit treating people. And she's been a real leader in the community as well.
Great. I mean, I think it was interesting when you brought up the large format camera and kind of that process of slowing down. And I think, all three of you doing photography have really kind of addressed that issue of relationship building and kind of building trust and rapport that I think, being with Graham, I've seen much more kind of how he interacts with people. And, I think that's something also working in a university, trying to emphasize that with students that, that is part of the process before you turn on a recorder, before you ask people questions, before you start taking any pictures, is that, there is this process of building rapport and trust. And so kind of wanted to talk about, that storytelling process and, Graham, but you could discuss sort of how being open about your personal experience with addiction, incarceration, and recovery has kind of influenced how people respond to you and share their stories.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a necessity, but I think it does help. And, I mean, often Susan and I have been working with someone on a big project, ongoing project, and it's like sort of working with community members and people who've got substance use disorder issues. And it's a big, long embedded project. And, we walked away from one of these shoots in Philadelphia recently, and this woman that we were working with who had coordinated over us and came up to us and says, "Wow, that was amazing. Everybody was so amazed at your story and what you guys had been through and what you guys were doing. And they really felt like they were talking to someone who really understood and they could really open up to." And I think that's really important, because I think a lot of people who've been the subjects of photographs, and I think a lot of people on the front lines helping those people, they get burned sometimes. And so they feel a bit cautious. And, I've just found that, because of my experience of many years of addiction and then, incarceration and detention and stuff, that when I share that with people, it opens doors that other people wouldn't get access to, I think, and it's also incredibly cathartic for not only for me, but for the people I photograph and the people that Susan interviews and the people that we, do these collaborations with, because we try to keep it as collaborative as possible. I've done extensive sort of workshops at a harm reduction center, Needle Exchange in Brooklyn, where we do collaborative storytelling and make zines and photographs and stuff like that. And we all pick what pictures go in the zines and stuff. So, it's rewarding to me to be able to share my story and hear other people open up about what they've been through. And as I said, it means more than just the pictures. It means it's cathartic. And humbling to me often as well when I hear other people, what they've been through and what their challenges still are. But these pictures here that Susan and I did for our series on re-entry and recovery are kind of interesting, because during my whole addiction, I photographed a lot of the people around me, you know, and they knew it and I knew it, and I photographed myself. I just did tons of pictures on little point and shoot digital cameras. I ended up never using any of those pictures because I was very troubled by the ethics of it and whether it was right for me to show these people that were friends of mine. Some I didn't know where they were, some were incarcerated, some I didn't know if they were dead. So I decided to try and track them down, as many of them as I could. And that's how this project kind of started, this one that Susan and I are, it's an ongoing project, and it's brought other people from different places into it, but there's a weird web of connectivity in it. And this is my friend Kim. And Kim and I knew each other and are very good friends. And we hung out for a long, long time, used drugs together, did a crazy trip to Las Vegas together, all sorts of stuff like that. But I found her, and she works with women in recovery now and takes meetings into jails and prisons and stuff. These are both friends of mine. The guy on the right is my friend Peter, again, someone I used drugs with. He's had a rougher ride of trying to get his life together though, but he's still a good friend. I saw him the other day there in the street. He's done okay. And this is George, who was my bunkie when I was in prison, another person that I've reconnected with after, and I've done working on a long-term project with him and his girlfriend. And these are our pictures in the exhibition, the ones on the right there. And this is someone else that, you know, and again, it's just challenging those obviously images of who uses drugs and takes drugs. You know, this girl's story is more horrifying, not horrifying, it's harsher and more gangster, I should say, than a lot of others, but you would never expect it looking at her. Oops, sorry. I'm gonna go back to that one. Where did you want me to go after this one, Suze?
I was gonna kind of go back to Nina and Kim and ask Nina first. I mean, it's interesting that, you know, certainly you and Josh, you know, you both teach Graham as well, teach documentary photography and photojournalism. So curious sort of how your collaboration with Kim, Nina, has impacted kind of how you think about documentary practices in photography and journalism, you know, particularly in terms of who gets to tell stories and, you know, how some of the challenges that we're seeing now about sort of media ethics guidelines, which is a topic I teach, and sort of the dominance of sort of objectivity and kind of who gets to define objectivity.
Yeah, well, there's a really, I think, positive reassessment going on, right, in terms of the practice of documentary photography. And I think with my colleagues who are writers in the journalism school, they're starting to climb on board. I mean, they at least embrace the idea that collaboration doesn't somehow mitigate truth, right? So, and getting away from the word objective as a journalist instead of a journalist who's seeking the truth, right? And so what I try to encourage in my students is that, you know, they're not superior beings because they call themselves journalists. They have to do the hard work to actually understand what communities or people that they are trying to report on are going through, and that whatever they're doing, they need to meet people where they are and not have a lens in which they judge that person. I think that's been some of the pitfalls of photojournalists in the past, is that there tends to be this sort of gaze, which is either the poor victim or those people over there are suffering so much, and without ever giving any understanding of why that might be, right? And so I try and teach them, one, that asking advice from someone that they are reporting on, asking an opinion from that person is actually a good thing. You know, how do they want to be presented and photographed is actually a wonderful thing to ask someone, right? And then also to try and, if you are doing stories about people who've been traumatized and living through trauma or recovery is kind of, don't just focus on the pain and suffering. Try and focus on the why. Like how did that happen, right? So put it in some sort of context, and that was really important in Kim's story, you know, because people did things to her, right? And it's important to make the, you know, to have that in the story. It's not as though she just magically turned to drugs, you know, if that makes sense. Susan, you're muted.
I was. We have a radiator that's participating in the background, but it's quiet now. So the
Probably was working out, but we're trying to deal. Kim just leave.
Sorry. Well, Kim, I wanted to ask you about, you know, kind of the drawing as part of the process of telling your story, you know, and just kind of wanted to ask you to talk about that, as well as whether that's something that you're still doing.
Thank you. Sorry about this. Great. The drawing, I love drawing. It's a way for me to express myself when there's no words. You know, sometimes it's hard to talk about stuff. I've always drawn. I can remember that I was really little, drawing things on walls, and you know, if I was locked away somewhere in the basement, I would use the chalk. I would draw everywhere I go. I think drawing can say what words can't say sometimes. And in order for me to let people know what I was going through, sometimes words, I didn't feel words was enough, you know, and so I tried to, and also with my drawings, you know, I can have more control, you know, so when I draw something, I see it, and then I could put it away, you know, and I tend to use that with, sometimes I have flashbacks and stuff, and now I'm clean, so I can't any longer go back to using drugs, so it's been very difficult, but I do draw a lot, and then I put it away in a box, and I think drawing is really valuable to get points across. And
I should say too that it's not just the drawings, but a lot of your writing, you know, it's an interesting point to make about sometimes the drawings express what, you know, you can't in words, but that there's, you know, also a lot of text and, you know, entries from diaries and things that are part of an autobiography, Miss Wish, and, you know, see some of that in the exhibition.
Yes, the diary entries were like purely because I thought I was going to die. So I just wanted to get it down somewhere because I know that books last forever. And so I wanted to write something and get it down because I wasn't really being heard when I was a child. So I used to also, writing is good. I used to write a lot too, write and draw, you know, so, and I sent all the stuff to Nina, and I don't think she quite knew exactly, you know, I would send her stuff and say, could you safeguard it? And she was very respectful, and she didn't really look through it until one day she looked through it. And so I, you know, I was just trying to gather information, and I just didn't want to get killed and nothing ever be done, you know, so I was trying to.
Yeah, and Josh, you obviously teach photojournalism. I'm curious, sort of, have worked on a lot of documentary projects. You know, what do you see shifting in terms of visual storytelling, you know, kind of along the lines of like, you know, the power dynamic and these issues of sort of objectivity being challenged a bit, and, you know, how students are approaching this process?
Well, for one, I mean, the demographics of the students have totally changed. You know, most of my classes are 75+% women. We definitely don't have enough people of color in our programs, I think. I know for sure in ours, but probably nationally that's true. the equipment itself is in everybody's pocket. I mean, I use my cell phone a lot, and my students do, and everybody has one. The ability to publish for everybody is at your fingertips at all times. So the barriers that, existed, especially when Graham and Nina were working as freelance photographers, which required a lot of connections and skill and technical skill, and just being able to pull off processing film and, getting images to print and only being able to put them in print, have completely changed. But the demographics have really changed. It's interesting, the stories that my students are interested in pursuing are much more varied than they once were. And there's just a different sensitivity to diversity now, which is really wonderful. So that, a story, let's say about a trans person isn't necessarily, connected with a drag show or something. I mean, it's just like, that's normal life, And I think that one of the things that came out of the workshop that I really loved is we had a participant named Chris Pridmore, who's a blogger. And he said, one of the things is like recovery as a day-to-day thing isn't that sexy and exciting. It's like, get up, have breakfast, go to work, it's not. And I think that what the students are realizing is that all kinds of other stories and situations are also that way. And sometimes it's the mundane parts of it that actually connect each other, connect different groups together, so that the audiences of a picture story, let's say on addiction or recovery, see pictures that look very similar to their own lives. And that universality, I think, is really wonderful, and I think that's really in the end what's going to help bring people together, is to say, wow, that kind of looks like my life, and they have to take their kids to the bus stop and, help them with their homework at night and make lunches and, worry about bills and all the other things, that it's very, very normal in a lot of ways, and that we can make pictures that help to build bridges between different communities rather than showing the starkness of something like addiction or sexual identity or something like that. So the students are much more in touch with different communities. And so the workshop that we had here, I think, was particularly nice because the students were able to actually hear stories from people who have had lived experiences. And some of those people are storytellers themselves. They're bloggers, photographers, and so they offer that same perspective. So, the demographics are definitely changing. I mean, in newsrooms, I would say the management hasn't changed in a demographic like our students have, but that's going to be one generation away. So we're going to see a huge shift there, going forward once our students are moving into roles where they're hiring people. And you also see sort of so many amazing organizations that have been grassroots started that are showing images from a much more diverse set of photographers, whether those people are in university programs or not. Their voices are being heard, not enough, but more than they were.
So just to highlight kind of one of those projects, this is a series called Taste of Life by an RIT photojournalism student, Cheyenne Boone, who has been documenting kind of the process of recovery of a family friend named Catherine. And I think, this is from a broader series that's an ongoing series for her, and just really kind of depicts, particularly just sort of the family reconnections that happen, which I think is sometimes we think of, both addiction and recovery, we focus on the individual going through it. And then, there's all this wider constellation, not just of family and friends, but community. So the title, Taste of Life, kind of captures both Catherine's tattoo here, but, I think also just what her life is like, trying to re-engage with her children and kind of be a mother. And, so Cheyenne has been working on this, and it was, really rewarding to be able to kind of be part of that project with her and kind of offer advice on, writing an artist statement and, why we selected certain pictures. And, Josh has obviously worked with her as well. But I think for her to get to the engagement and the feedback from people in the community or people in the workshop, who are in recovery, just, also can kind of broaden, how you think about visual storytelling.
If I can ask Susan a question, you gave her some really great advice on the writing in terms of the captions and how she framed the story. And I think that's one of the things that, you know, our students really are working on is, you know, how not just making the pictures, but how any accompanying text, you know, frames it and sets it up, because that often is like read first. And then the audience is like, oh, okay, I know these 3 facts about this person. So that is going to frame how I look at the pictures. And you spent a lot of time working with her. And I wonder if you could maybe just give a couple of examples of how you worked with Cheyenne to sort of recraft and some of the text so that some of those perceptions going into the work were, you know, reframed, really, to use that word again.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one thing is just, you know, names, right? So, you know, using sometimes just first names. So in this case, you know, talking about particularly for someone in the community and, you know, showing images with the family that, you know, thinking about just using someone's first name because you don't know, you know, what they're going to feel later on. Or sometimes we've shown work in an exhibition and we can't control, you know, Nina, you talked about control, and, you know, have spoken about it a lot with some of, you know, other projects that you've worked on. Once the images are out there, especially with the internet, with social media, the just longevity of everything, that, you know, it's important to really think, even if the person that you're working with and collaborating with thinks at the moment, well, I've known you, you're a family friend, it's okay, I trust you, you know, you do lose that control, you know, particularly, as I said, online. And then another thing is just thinking about how we describe people. So, you know, I've noticed, you know, as Graham's story has been told, not just by us, but written about by other people, is that, you know, we always start with, you know, a former heroin addict. You know, Graham actually used crack as well. So we often try to point out, you know, people use multiple drugs. But just, you know, do you start out by saying Graham is now a professor, a photographer, you know, a husband, a father, as opposed to front loading the story of a former heroin addict or formerly incarcerated? So, you know, other people have raised this question of when does that ID get to shift? You know, when are you not defined by this moment in your past? And maybe Nina and Kim, if you have kind of thoughts on that and kind of, you know, how these identities are presented and can kind of be really limiting to people, especially when we're trying to use short text.
Yes, I find right now, so what's happening with me right now is I have 6 months clean, and that's the longest I've ever got. And I'm finding that I moved to a new studio, and I've got new doctors and stuff like that. So your history follows you. So it's really hard for me to shake the addiction part, because I mean, being called an addict first and foremost, then a illustrator or a peer advocator, or it's just really difficult when you have a paper trail. So I've got to figure out a way to get rid of that paper trail or go back and correct it. I've got to call my doctors and have them correct things that are no longer the case. And
but even like we were talking the other day, and someone was asking Kim that she needed a resume, right? And we were talking about that because you were like, well, I don't have a resume, but actually there's lots of things that she's done, and there's lots of things that actually can be prioritized and centered, as opposed to, you know, addict or this or that. And I think it's just maybe sometimes, you know, the person is not aware of how much they've also accomplished, or that the people around them, you know, are not skilled enough to say, well, wait a minute, you did this talk, and you did this, and you did that, and you're, you know, a co-author of a book, and you've done all these other things. And I think, you know, what you're getting at right now is so important, Susan. And because are we always defined by our traumas? Are we always defined by, you know, the bad stuff that we've experienced? I mean, we've all experienced bad things. Could you imagine if I'm, you know, introduced as something I did, you know, some time ago? I mean, how debilitating is that? And so, you know, it's a real kind of balancing act, because this is an exhibition about recovery and reframing addiction, so you want to put it in some sort of context, but you also don't want to trap the person in some role that then they're stuck with for the rest of their lives, right?
But at the end, all of that, I think, particularly for media, right? We end up reaching for shorthand, and the shorthand we reach for is the shorthand we've heard over and over, that the media has had a way of writing about drugs as, framed by the drug war that, is ongoing today. And, even as some of the narrative has shifted, with people using opioids, which is legal painkillers, so it made it sort of more palatable to talk to the media, to talk about your experience, but then it's kind of juxtaposed, good and bad people based on the drugs they use, or if we're more sympathetic to that representation. There's a question, Nina, can you see the Q&A there? I can read it here too.
Go closer. Yeah.
Matthew.
Yeah.
Matthew, and it says, just for everybody else, your comment of seeking truth reminds me of Gene Smith's famous comment, let the truth be the prejudice. How in this current environment do we convince people that there is a truth and that there are some perspectives are more valid or truthful? Which I would just kind of maybe even add that, with this particular topic we're discussing, is there a singular truth, or is it important to kind of think about, each individual might have a different truth to their experience?
If a different journalist had met Kim, or maybe had met Kim 5 years ago, they would have told one story, right? And maybe part of that story would have been true, fine. But you have to decide what is the story that you want to present to the world, right? And how can you be confident that that story is a truth that's important to tell? And so if you actually look at our book, it's a story about a lot of things, but it's really a story about love in many ways, right? About love and the desire to be heard. And so that's a truth that I think is in some ways easy to persuade people of. I mean, we do know now through lots of research that you don't convince people about an alternate set of facts. Like, I'm not going to convince someone by showing them facts that, I'm right and you're wrong. You convince them through some sort of emotional journey and transformation and storytelling. And so maybe you're weaving a story that, I would say like honest, okay? That if you're going to be truthful, then it's going to be honest. And I think that that's how you try and convince people, right? I don't know, Matthew, if that answered your question.
I have one other thing to add. I had a former student call into one of my classes. Brittany Greason is a photographer in Detroit, and she works a lot in Flint. Like for many years, she's been working out of Flint, and she called herself a context photographer instead of a content photographer. And I kind of like that because she's been on this project in Flint for so long. And she said, you just can't understand it without all the context. And so I think truth needs context, really. It's easy to say a fact, but sometimes the fact, can be contradictory because the context could be different. And so the context around this is all really, really important, So I think that one of the things that Graham and Susan have done with this show is provide a varied amount of context to this, story that everybody has their own individual experience with. And framing that around context is really important. I think Cheyenne, the student work that we saw is a great example of that. Where, like I was saying earlier, we see a mother, parenting in a lot of the same ways that I parent. I take my kids to athletic events and we have dinner around the table and, that kind of thing. So, I think that I like the way that she used that phrase context photographer, because it's like, if you want to do anything in depth, that's what it's all about is getting emotion, but also telling the different ways that context sort of has to play into the scenario.
I think it's important.
I want to say one thing. Don't you think that that's really the direction that documentary photography has gone, but away from like this single image, like the single perfect still image, and into something that's more, that provides deeper context and more layers and more history? Because the single image, while it can be very attractive and powerful, it can also be very deceptive, right? Or very one-dimensional. And I think that I know this group here as image makers have been maybe a little frustrated by that in our earlier careers. And so that I think is really positive.
I think it's interesting too to think about, how an image, with text, you have the opportunity, for example, in media, there's this idea of how a story is framed influences how the audience both assigns responsibility for the problem and then responsibility for fixing it, right? So if we're talking about addiction and recovery, that if it's framed as an individual story, then it's kind of up to that person to, it's their responsibility or, their fault somehow that they developed this addiction. And then it's kind of on them to, choose a path to recovery. Whereas if you kind of step out, and Nina, I appreciated that, you kind of set up your meeting Kim in London, kind of talking about the Thatcher years, right? So, all this context, the more you can widen it, explains that, issues of, access to resources, jobs, mental health, all these things, kind of shape the problems that people end up encountering. I guess a tougher question is, how do you show that through the images, that wider context to tell that story?
Well, I mean, one of the ways that you do that is by making sure that more people have cameras and pens in their hands, who have those different perspectives. I mean, that's one of the ways that context can be told, is just because of the maker of the work has a different perspective and has a different experience, than who have been mainly a lot of photographers in the past. So that's one way. And, like I said, we're seeing that certainly in some ways in demographic shifts at our school and probably at others too, but that will continue to happen in for positive ways, really.
Kim, there's a question in the Q&A for you.
Okay.
It says, Kim, it's from Lauren. How would you recommend individuals telling their stories in a way that is safe yet healing? Do you have other ideas about how people can share their stories with their community or a trusted few in a creative way?
I think I don't know. I guess like if you, I mean, whatever, if you're comfortable, like I feel comfortable like sharing my story. Some people don't want to be they don't want to be shown. So there's other ways you could like make comics or do an art exhibition, or there's a lot of ways that you could do this, but I don't know. My dog is chewing carpet now, and I can't even think straight. There's a lot of different ways. Could you repeat the question again? I'm sorry.
I think it had a couple parts. So maybe the first part, you've talked about a couple of things that relate to this idea of finding a way to tell your story in a way that's safe and healing. So,
right.
Kind of one thought is like choosing a safe collaborator, right? Because none of us in the end, even if you're writing a memoir, you're going to have editors, you're going to, so how do you make those choices? And then how do you make it a healing process as opposed to becoming re-traumatized?
Right. Like as with the book with Nina, I mean, I wouldn't have told any photojournalist the stuff I told Nina. She had to like almost prove herself a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And gain. She had a lot of respect for me. I think you have to get to know a person before, like, you get the full story. And but me personally, I have a way. I kind of trust people first before I, if they mess up, then I don't trust them, But I don't know.
I think like if someone is presenting themselves in a transactional way, then you're not going to really be able to get any kind of honest story. And so I think that that's what can be off-putting for people who, you know, experience trauma or addiction. As a journalist comes and says, well, I need this story.
Yeah.
Well, that's too bad, right? And so I think that there's like, if you feel like you're in a safe space, if you feel like you're in a safe space, then I think it allows you the freedom to open up, right? And so, like, how do you create that safe space? Is it with a journalist, or is it with your peers, or, you know, I think it really varies. And it almost doesn't matter what the output is, right? Whether it's a drawing or a photograph, but if you feel that you're in a safe space, right?
And Graham, you know, you could probably address too the difference between, you know, the opportunities you've had to tell your own story versus, you know, and trying to retain that control to some degree over, you know, how your story has been told by other people, you know, writing about whether it's an exhibition or the photographs, your self-portraits.
Yeah, I mean, controls is a weird word to use. It is important, you know, because I found that in the beginning when I started sharing my story and sharing my photographs, a lot of people wanted to take that. I went to some major magazines and picture editors and such, and people wanted to take that and make it kind of theirs as opposed to be mine and mold it into what they wanted, you know. And that was hard for me because I'm a kind of yes person. I like when people like my work and I go, oh yeah, that's great, you know. And I have to rely on Susan to drag me back in and say, well, think about this, what this really means, you know. And it's right because, you know, it is important to try and maintain some sort of control about how, you know, whether it's your personal story or work that you've done or long-term embedded projects, because it can easily I mean, there's pictures of me out there and pictures that I've taken out there that have been used out of context and taken and tried to be manipulated. And someone recently just reached out to me about some documentary they were making about addiction, and they had pulled a whole bunch of my images and pictures I'd taken of other people and dropped them into this crazy montage that they were, where someone, I don't even want to go into it, but I was kind of shocked when I saw it because they did it, and then they just expected me to go, oh yeah, that's great, sure, yeah, you can use them. Oh, there's no budget either, you know. And whether the budget had been zero or a lot, it didn't matter. I didn't like what they'd done with it. I didn't like the context they were using, but people feel that they've got this right to take stuff and then and that you're going to be kind of happy with it or okay with it, you know. And when it involves trauma or pain or things that stigmatize or things like what Kimberly was saying about that follow you around everywhere, you know, your previous addiction, your criminal record, all that sort of stuff. I think people have to start really understanding when they use that, the ramifications used out of context are huge. They're really huge for people, because especially now with the internet has a way of finding you and finding people and taking things and sort of misrepresenting. So I think it's really important that people start to understand that.
And if anybody else has questions they want to post, you know, you can do that using the Q&A button there. You know, so feel free to type anything in.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in if I could to bounce off what you were saying about context, and also kind of what Kim was saying about how she uses drawing when words don't work, and kind of how the multimedia aspect of this show kind of shows the different branches of how to tell a story or how to relate to someone else's story, because some of us respond more immediately to images and photographs, but other people get more depth out of text or out of video or out of reading a book, or in what you guys have done with this show, where you invite viewers to contribute their own definitions of recovery and addiction. And so that sort of multimedia platform, I think, helps it take beyond just the documentary photograph. But one of the series we didn't get to talk about was Graham's series of some of the ephemera from the older sort of antique or vintage collections that really kind of show us how addiction and recovery had been characterized in the past, and you know, how people labeled it, like literally. And I wondered if you just talk about that series real quickly here, Graham, as a layer in this show.
I'm trying to find out.
Thanks for asking that, John. So while he's looking for those images, I can kind of set that up. which is that we had the opportunity to travel to Illinois to photograph some of the objects, documents, papers in this addiction studies archive that had started with a lot of contributions from a researcher who has kind of long been a historian and done research studies about addiction, but mostly recovery kind of in later years. And his name is William White. And so I had connected with him just in my interest in learning more about recovery. He's in recovery himself and has also, worked as a clinician. So really kind of sees this from multiple perspectives. So, we got a grant from the New School where we both teach, and we're able to go to Illinois and photograph, some things dating back to, the 1800s. Like I'll let Graham kind of describe as he's flipping through these images. Do you want to go back to the bottle?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting for me to see these sort of things, these old prescription pads for opium and how cocaine was used in all these like sort of tinctures and medicines. And like I was reading the sides of some of the bottles and things, and it had like, 2 drops for a child, 4 for a woman, 6 for a man, and it was like, but they were all full of these like sort of various things. And, even these things here, there was the archive has this huge amount of sort of stuff. And we've photographed loads and loads and loads of it. And, a lot of it was leaflets about sort of different types of drug use. And there's one that I should have put in here actually, but I just did this an hour ago, was one that says, and it was saying, basically addressing, what do we do? Do we incarcerate or do we treat addicts? And it was this leaflet that was getting handed around in the sort of New York State or whatever it was. And it was 100 years old. And I'm looking at this thing and I was thinking, how can it be possible that we're still having this argument 100 years later? Do we incarcerate or do we treat people? And it's like, this is a leaflet from 100 years ago. But, this guy's archive is amazing. He has buttons and badges and T-shirts and videos and pulp novels. And you just see how, how addiction and addicts and drug users have been viewed and over all these decades, that there's all these pulp novels for the 50s and 60s that paint women as temptresses with drugs and alcohol that lead men astray. It's crazy. It has dozens and dozens of them. And we had photographs of those as well.
I think it also illustrates sort of just this, this idea that for so long we've kind of flailed at this idea of treatment, right? So whether it's for addiction, mental health issues, the era of, cocaine being available, basically, as Graham said, a certain amount for children, adults, and then just kind of continuing to think that if we add this other thing, dispensing opium, that's going to fix things, with like women's hysteria, in the past. So I think what was fun about adding this is really, trying to give people a more historic lens. I mean, if you were really going to kind of do that arc of history to be able to sort of show, different periods where different drugs have been demonized, and certainly alcohol as well, you could do that. But in this era of people really focusing on the here and now, it's been nice to kind of broaden that out and look at sort of, this is a topic we've been wrestling with, as a society for a very long time. And, you could argue we still haven't gotten it right.
Yeah.
So, Josh, just kind of, getting close to wrapping up here, but you mentioned at the beginning that when you started photographing, the portraits for the book Dope Sick, that you hadn't really had a lot of experience with this topic. And, you sat in on the workshop and, had an opportunity to hear what people discussed. So, just curious about, how your perceptions of addiction and recovery have changed kind of through this process of working with Beth and meeting more people, a variety of experiences.
Well, yeah, it's not unlike any other larger project I've ever worked on around Indigenous rights, immigration. I mean, once you get into a project and you learn the context and you meet real people, your perspective absolutely has to change. And I think that, for people that have no lived experience personally, or no strong, friendships or family connections with someone who has a lived experience on any topic, it's very difficult to really empathize and understand a certain topic. So for me, this was really, like any other project, I am excited to meet real people so that I can reframe how my misconceptions or preconceived conceptions about a particular topic are or are not correct. And one of the things that I'm really excited about following the workshop is that I can, we had, I think, mostly sophomores taking the workshop, and that gives them, a couple years before they might embark on a year-long project for their senior capstone, where I wouldn't be surprised if a few of them take this on and do so with this, mindset of looking at it through a different lens. I'd be surprised if a couple of them didn't look into the topic. So that for me is really exciting. And then they go into their professional world, having known more people in this community who can broaden their perspective. And I think it's a sort of like a flag to check yourself before you go into any project. Have you really talked to real people? Have you sought other perspectives? Is there a collaborator? Is there someone else who should maybe be doing this project instead of you, who has a better perspective? Or is there someone you should be working closely with, an editor, perhaps, an advisor, a mentee, a mentor, who can give some guidance? And I think, that's part of what I think, we talked about, Nina was mentioning before, is just, how, who gets to tell which stories. And, I certainly don't feel that I can only tell stories that I've had lived experiences with, but certainly I know that if I haven't, I need to make sure that I'm doing even more research and collaborating with someone who has. And I think that's the framework that I want my students to take. We talk a lot about working with some kind of a collaborator, whether it's someone from a nonprofit who helps you frame the issue, or whether it's just doing sort of standard academic research or journalistic research. But that absolutely has to happen before any of the buttons can be pushed on the camera, really. That's just really crucial.
And Kim, I was interested too, and when we did the exhibition in New York, you and Nina both came to a panel discussion we had, and we really appreciated that you kind of spoke about your experience with housing and kind of the challenges of housing, because I think sometimes we think in a pretty limited way about, particularly as addiction and treatment has been brought into the healthcare system, that we can have a very health-focused approach. So, how would you say, or what are the things that you would say people misunderstand or don't understand about the process of recovery, more broadly, not just from addiction, but just, trauma, sexual abuse? What do we need to know about recovery?
I think recovery, it takes a long time. I think that it's trial and error. You're going to try one thing and it's not going to work, and you just got to keep trying. I think that people need to understand patience, like for instance with Nina, right? Mm-hmm. She's the most patient person, and I've put her through so much, and I really feel bad. But the one thing that she did is she stayed strong and she stuck with me. She said she would never leave me, and she was true to her word. Through hospitals, through being arrested, through my drug times, she just hung by me, and that it was truly remarkable. I think without that, and she kept telling me, it doesn't have to be this way. You're an important person. You're this, you're that, and because I was forever telling myself I was a piece of shit. So I excuse my language, and it's just. For me, it took so long because trauma starts from when you're young. I mean, it takes you longer, I think, for to get over trauma, because there's a lot of trust issues. Mm-hmm. And as far as addiction, basically, when people, places, and things, if you get away from them, you have a better shot. I mean, I tried to recover for many years, and the system always sent me back to the same place, like the harm reduction program that was, I mean, it worked for me a little, partly, but it could have also killed me too, because it was in a neighborhood that was, you know, drugs were right outside my window and also in the building. So there's better harm reduction programs, some other harm reduction programs. I just think you have to fight for what you want and the people that are also supporting you and being on the same page.
You know, just as someone who's you know, watched how others have treated Kim over the years, you know, various social service agencies, housing, you know, police, hospitals, all the rest, is that it's important to actually listen to the person and listen to what they're saying. You know, if they say, wow, I am not able to progress in this place, it's not an excuse. It's not bullshit. It's like, actually, they can't. And so listen to what they're saying. And I remember, you know, what was it, like 8 months ago, a year ago, when you said, I have to get out of this neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I was feeling very uncertain about that because I didn't want to see Kim, you know, out on the street again. But she was totally correct. You know, is that she was not able to progress in that environment anymore for a whole host of reasons. And so I think, you know, listening to people, also that recovery, and I'm sure Graham and Susan can talk about this, you can't do that on your own, right? It's not like it's a singular mission, right? You need people around you that are going to be there.
As sort of a wrap up, Graham, anything you want to add to that?
I mean, I agree with a lot of what Kimberly says. I mean, and there's no one size fits all in recovery, and that's what people have to start understanding. You know, the media and the movie industry paints this sort of thing of like, they show these stories of addiction, and they either glamorize it or whatever they do with it. And then when somebody finds recovery, it's never touched on. They just see them at a 12-step meeting, or they're better, or they're on a beach, or they're happy with their family. And that bit in the middle, that grey area that's probably as traumatic as anything, is never addressed. And if we never address it, then people never know. They just think it's this magical, miraculous recovery, and it does not happen like that. Like Kimberly, I tried so many times and I failed so many times until I found the right thing for me, where people listened to me and people talked to me. Mine was in a prison rehab, in a prison, the most unusual place, you know. But I'd tried detoxes, I'd tried this, I'd tried cold turkey, I tried everything, and I found it in prison. But that might not work for someone else, and we need to listen to the people. It's really important that we talk to people in recovery and people who've been directly affected and people who are using, to ask them what's going to work for you and help them find that thing, you know, because there isn't a one size fits all. There just definitely isn't, you know, and then help them through that, you know, and we need tons more funding.
Right,
it's true.
You touched on, you had shown a bit, which was interesting, kind of combining, you know, a piece of artwork that's in the exhibition in Rochester, which was by Raymond Waters, called Transformation, that uses, it's basically an exploration of portrayals of addiction using cut up 35mm frames from 4 films: Traffic, Trainspotting, Requiem for a Dream, and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And so just to kind of wrap up, I think, you know, thinking about these portrayals that we're all surrounded by, right? Not just news media, but art, entertainment, you know, and what messaging we've absorbed and kind of ways that we can kind of start moving away from those. This is the Raymond Waters piece there. And it was interesting to have, you know, the students in the workshop kind of went back and rewatched those movies and kind of wrote their impressions of sort of what they depicted. And, you know, there's a longer list that we had talked about that had come from Parade magazine about, you know, 30 prominent films about addiction and recovery, and realizing they really basically tell predominantly the same narrative and predominantly focus on addiction. So, you know, just wanted to thank again John and Josh and Laura, you know, for helping us bring this to Rochester. You know, we would love to do it in other communities, so hopefully we'll have that opportunity. and Kim and Nina for joining us tonight, and for organizing this. And it'll be up through February 21st and at City Art Space downtown Rochester. So hopefully people will get it.
I just want to remind everybody the show Beyond Addiction, Reframing Recovery will stay on view at RIT City Art Space through February 21st, 2021. We hope you can visit the exhibition in person, but you can also visit our website, cityartspace.rit.edu, for more information there. Or, Susan, visit reframingrecovery.org, right, for more resources pertaining to this particular project and maybe how it evolves in other locations and involving other artists over time. But I certainly want to extend my thanks to all of you for participating and bringing this exhibition to our space here in Rochester and at RIT. Big thanks to Susan for hosting, Graham Mackindo, Joshua Meltzer, Nina Berman, and Kimberly Stevens. Thank you all for joining us for this really important discussion. And I hope we can get together again real soon. And those of you that joined us this evening, thank you for being a part of our discussion tonight. Follow us on social media at RIT City Art Space, and you can also join our email list to find out about upcoming exhibitions and talks. But until then, thanks for being with us this evening, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks so much, John, for doing this.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending.